By way of beginning, I'm going to ask George in a second to play a very brief clip, and he'll play it a couple of times. It's one I think you've probably heard.
Hello, please. Help me, I'm Amanda Berry.
You need police, fire, or ambulance?
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here, I'm free now. Hello, please. Help me, I'm Amanda Berry.
You need police, fire, or ambulance?
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here, I'm free now. Hello, please. Help me, I'm Amanda Berry.
You need police, fire, or ambulance?
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here, I'm free now.
Felt like we were hearing that all week. Hope most of you recognize it. It's the voice of Amanda Berry, one of the 3 women who were held captive in a home for a decade since she was a young teenager. And those powerful words of, I was a captive for nearly 10 years. I'm free now. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end when I heard those words. Can we imagine what it would be like to be captive for 10 years and to be free? It's hard. It's hard, and yet I think we can, when we dig into our deepest longing, understand our desire and our need to be free. And if you want to understand the work of the disciples, it is to proclaim the freedom promised in the way of Christ in the world. We come to a place in our faith journey, if we are fortunate enough to accept and receive God's grace, where like all 3 of these young women, we declare, I was captive and I am free now. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And the story that we heard from the book of Acts this morning is of epic proportions, mythological and appropriately so, given that they're there in Macedonia, the home of many great myths. A story of Paul walking through the streets of Macedonia and being harassed by a young woman, a slave, possessed of a spirit that could tell fortune. And for days she followed behind him saying, these men are declaring a way of salvation, a way of freedom. They can tell you how to do that. And I think I really enjoy the part that it says, and Paul was so annoyed with her, annoyed with the spirit. It wasn't that he had this great desire to make her free. It wasn't that he was going to, change her life. He just wanted her to shut up. And he drove the spirit out of her. And she was free. And then the trouble begins. The trouble begins not with slavery, but with freedom. A therapist, Wayne Bowers, who works with trauma victims, was interviewed and talking about the Michelle Knight and Amanda Berry and Gina De Jesus, and they're kind of shielding themselves from the media and the press. And there's a couple clips, one of them with their hoods getting into their house, and Amanda Berry sneaking in when no one knew. And he was explaining to them, they're not trying to hide from the media or from the camera. What will be so difficult for them right now is that they'll be hiding from freedom. They'll be hiding from the expansiveness of what their world has become. Some of you may have read Emma Donohue's book, The Room. Some of you read that? Story of a mother and a 5-year-old boy, Jack, who are kept in a room, isolated in the back. Actually, the boy was born there, so it's been over 5 years. She manages to get Jack out in a rolled up carpet she asked her captor to dispose of for them. And he did practice and everything. He slips away. And they get out, and it's only halfway through the book. And as a reader, I found myself thinking, well, what more is going to be coming? But what happens is that you discover that all the problems that come for them with freedom. For Jack, who's never known anything beyond this room, it's an incredibly disorienting experience. And for the mother who's held it together for all these years, she kind of falls apart in freedom that she has not known. So there is this understanding in discipleship that we are called to freedom, but that's the beginning, not the end of the story of discipleship. Once we receive and accept the grace of God's freedom, we're drawn into a much more expansive world than we ever imagined existed. The other thing that's important to acknowledge about this story is that it is not about the freedom of one, but the freedom of many. When the prison walls are shaken by the earthquake, the writer of Acts makes a point of saying, and all the prisoners, the chains fell off them. Not just Paul and Silas, but everybody's chains fell off. The kind of freedom that is proclaimed in the Christian community in response to Jesus is a freedom that is impossible if it is not extended to everybody. The people of Israel cannot have freedom as long as the people of Palestine are oppressed. We cannot have freedom as long as 1,200 people are killed making products for us in Bangladesh. That is not true freedom. And one of the things that happens with this kind of freedom is we try to suppress it with all kinds of subterfuge. What happens when Paul drives the spirit out of the slave girl? Her owners get upset because they're not going to be able to make money on her anymore, right? And they take Paul and Silas into the square and they make accusations about them. But they don't accuse them of having driven a spirit out of the slave. They don't accuse him of getting into their economic life, of taking that away. You listen carefully, they accuse them of being foreigners. These men are Jews, they're not even Romans. They accuse them of disrupting the laws and politics of the country. They say, these men are teaching things that are against the law here. They say also they're disrupting the community. They're disrupting the peace. They don't mention that the real issue is they're disrupting our economy, our right to have what we want and to use other people to get it. What they do is they use all of the things we still hear, right? Foreign workers, disrupting the peace, teaching things that are against the law. That's what we say when the Occupy movements gather in a marketplace. They don't say, these people are going to ruin our economy, which is really what everyone's afraid of. What they say is, they're being disruptive. They're leaving garbage around. They're people who aren't really part of our culture. And they do all those kind of things to try and deny the freedom that is inherent in that movement. I don't know if you remember the quote that was on the screen when we started. It's one I love by Harriet Tubman. She says, I freed 1,000 slaves. Harriet Tubman made many journeys into the South of the U.S. before the end of slavery to bring people out of slavery, initially to the northern U.S. and then into Canada. And she said, I freed 1,000 slaves, and I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves. One of the things I think this reading does for us is remind us that our freedom is tied up with the freedom of others. I think of those deaths in Bangladesh, and I think we are almost up to 1,200 now. Each day the body count gets higher and higher. And to hear that for 10 cents more a garment, which is one of the calculations I heard this week, 10 cents more a garment, the people who work there could have the kind of safety that they deserve not to be experiencing this. They could be paid a living wage. They could be experiencing the kind of human rights they deserve. 10 cents. We cannot be free as long as we're part of that system, as long as we're part of that network, until we take responsibility for our own freedom in a way that acknowledges the importance of others' freedom. Well, it is clear that the work of discipleship is an ongoing work of welcoming and embracing our freedom in ways that attends to the freedom of others. It means that as we receive that grace, it is not fulfilled until it is fulfilled for all. It is not fulfilled until the foundations of the institutions that bind us in chains, as they did Paul and Silas and the other prisoners, shake and crumble. That is the freedom to which we are called. And we take steps toward it each and every day. May God guide those steps. And may God open our hearts to recognize the ways in which we are trapped in systems that cause so much harm to others and sometimes to ourselves and definitely to our planet.